Recording in progress. Good afternoon, Rotary Club of Flint. Welcome to another beautiful Friday. It is February the 10th, and we're very glad to have you here today. So with it being the 10th, that means it is Umbrella Day, although maybe we should have had that yesterday. It's National Flannel Day, and all the news is Print Day. It's also the anniversary of Nelson Mandela's exit from prison back in 1990 after 27 years at Robben Island. And tomorrow is White Shirt Day, which is being celebrated today, in fact, yes, which commemorates the end of the 1937 sit-down strike right here in Flint, and the time that GM recognized the UAW. Of course, next Tuesday is Valentine's Day. So we still have time to get that special card for someone who's important in your life. Of course, February is also Black History Month, so I hope you've been brushing up on your history here. So we'll have a little mini quiz a bit later. But of course, the main attraction here today is we have Senator John Cherry, who will be presenting an update from his role in the Michigan legislature, and that will be an important part of our governance program. So let us proceed now with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, the nation of the Father, for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. And as Rotarians, we try to live by the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all observant? Will it build and better friendships? Be better than and then I'd like to invite up Reg Lancaster, who's going to present us with our inspirational message.
Let us pray. In his great glorious rhetoric, Isaiah the prophet has God saying something like this: I am about to create new heavens and a new earth and a new time, but no more shall there be an infant who lives but a few days, or an old person who does not live out a lifetime. A place where people shall not labor in vain or bear children only to die in city streets. A new land where people shall call and I will answer. A new land where the wolf and the lamb shall dwell together in safety. A place where there shall not be hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain. Do you live in that land yet? Have you seen it? Isn't it towards this land that you are marching?
Thank you very much, Reg. And that's for please continue your lunch. We'll get back together. Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you've enjoyed your lunch. By all means, please continue to eat. But we'd like to go ahead and get started with our business portion of the meeting today. So before I make any other announcements, I just wanted to be sure that folks may have heard that this morning there was a boil water advisory issued for the entire city of Flint So thankfully, we've got our nice bottles of water here, so we're covered at the food bank. But just in case you may not have heard and are traveling elsewhere in the city after here, they just wanted to let you know that that boil water advisory has been issued due to a water main break. Also wanted to share a request, an opportunity, a way to be of use and service to the club, because what are we as employees if not people of service? So we've had a member who for a number of years has taken on leadership for the task of wrangling, shall we say, recruiting people to take on monthly service roles. And typically we've had a point person for each month of the year, and they kind of help then wrangle folks for their month. Well, the person who has overseen that process for some time is ready to step back from that. And so there's an opportunity if somebody has an interest or would be willing to take on that kind of coordinator role to make sure that all the months are covered. That is something that would be most appreciated. It basically means making sure that there is somebody who's in charge of coordinating for their month, and of helping to assist in recruiting members for a given week if something falls through or might need another pair of hands. There are several months that already have people in place, and so it might just involve confirming who's interested and already in charge of that month, as well as helping to fill any of those gaps. So if that's something that you could see yourself helping with, please feel free to reach out. You can either reach out to me, or you can reach out to Patrick Naswell and Jerry Hill as the chair people for the administration committee. That would be certainly very appreciated. We do have all of the weekly roles covered, I think, through the end of this month, but that's also an invitation that if you may have the availability in your calendar, maybe you're planning to come to a Rotary meeting anyhow, you're able to take on one of the service tasks for the remaining months of this year. Again, we always appreciate more hands. I know that typically we serve during our birthday month. Some birthday months are more populated than others. And so it's always nice to have a group of folks who are willing to fit. I also want to provide an update briefly around Shelter Box. As you all know, earlier this week, there was an earthquake that devastated parts of eastern Turkey and northern Syria. And so we as a club for the last few years have been making a financial contribution towards Shelter Box, which is a Rotary initiative, a Rotary International project we've partnered with to provide emergency housing and shelter to people in response to crises around the world. And so I want to let you know that Shelter Box will be having kind of an informational update on the status of their work with that in terms of Turkey and Syria and some other current projects. Anybody who's interested can register for that webinar. It's going to be taking place at noon this Saturday. I put the link there. You can also go to the Shelter Box USA website if you'd like to connect that way. I'll also mention that we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the start of the war in Ukraine. Shelter Box has also been very active there. And so if you go to their Shelter Box USA website, you'll also see at the top, there's a webinar to register for an update on Ukraine. And that will be held on February 28th, that's a Tuesday at 1 p.m. So 2 opportunities that may be of interest. Before we get up to our Black History Month quiz, I do have a late breaking request from our very own Michael Day to give a brief announcement.
First, $5. Second, thank you for reminding me that Tuesday is Valentine's Day. The Humanity and Harmony Music Festival, part of Daniel Pearl World Music Days, has expanded. It's with the Flint Jewish Federation. We bring together musicians from all styles to come together, but usually it's been in the fall. Well, this year, we're celebrating Black History Month with the River Raisin Ragtime Music. It's a ragtime band out of Monroe, Michigan, 13 pieces. And it's amazing. You know, ragtime, along with jazz, is America's original music. And it's Thursday at Mott Community College at the Mott Memorial Building's auditorium. And guess what? It's free. Bring anybody down. Come on and see these people. It's a great show. It's 7 o'clock on Thursday, the 16th. And if you happen to be a musician and you're interested in learning a little bit more about the history of ragtime, which, by the way, they'll talk about during the show, we have a master class at 4:30. in the auditorium as well. So free lessons for anybody who wants to come. Drag time. Come on and see us Thursday.
Yeah, sure. My dad is a huge Scott Joplin fan, so I'll have to share that. Yes, somebody here. Sure, why don't you come up here?
So hot off the press, one of the things I want to share with all of you, a quick civic update. Here in Genesee County, we will be having a May election this year. In several communities, the city of Montrose is having an election on a marijuana ordinance. Lake Fenton School District, which includes Grand Blanc Township, Fenton Township, the city of Fenton, and Mundy Township are all having an election for a school bond. And New Lothrop School District, which we have six registered voters in Genesee County that live in New Lothrop, and Flushing Township will be having an election for a sinking fund. Just wanted to share that information with you. There'll be more upcoming, but if you live in those communities, expect the May election.
So if you ever had any doubt as to whether your vote counts, you have the ability to affect the entire district of New Lothrop on ballot. All right, so here we are. Last week we had a City of Flint focused Black History quiz in honor of our Black History Month. And today, given that we have a representative of the state legislature, I thought it was appropriate to have a state of Michigan themed quiz. So as before, there's no need to raise your hand. You can just call out when you think you know the answer. There are no prizes other than fame and glory that comes from knowing stuff. So yes, okay, yes, Sojourner Truth. So there's actually a statue of her erected in Battle Creek. So if you haven't seen that, the next time you go through Battle Creek, that's worth checking out.
Did Michael J. toss that out?
I didn't, so I heard him answer, but I will say that I consulted no one else in developing.
She's in my book, just in case anybody's.
That's well, probably there may be a few others on this quiz that are out there.
I just wanted to
Just a
clarify.
little product placement here. All right, question 2. So the march in this Michigan city was the largest civil rights demonstration prior to the '63 March on Washington. And yes, it happened in Detroit. So yes, there were many parts of the I Have a Dream speech that Dr. King expounded on in the moment. He rehearsed a lot of it right here in Detroit. All right. So next question, born in Alabama, she led the youth division of the Montgomery NAACP, launched the bus boycott. She moved to Detroit and worked on issues. Yes, indeed. And as a bonus, anybody know under whose office was she working when she was doing all that in Detroit?
No.
John Conyers. Yep, she worked for Conyers for many, many years. Yep. All right. So this one is maybe the lesser well-known fact here. So this man was Michigan's first Black state legislator, and he also won the first racial discrimination case in Michigan that outlawed discrimination in public accommodation. I didn't know this until recently. So this is, let me get his name exactly correct. It is William Webb Ferguson. William Webb Ferguson. Oh, you did. Fabulous. Yes, yes. Now, not to say that that ended discrimination in practice. It definitely did not, but at least it was a court case in Michigan that outlawed discrimination in public accommodation. All right. And this Detroit mother of 5 traveled to Alabama in 1965 to march. What was that? Not Louise, although there's a almost similar sound. Viola. Yep. Yep, very, very good. All right. And we have one more. This human rights activist and future Black Muslim leader lived in and near Lansing for much of his youth. Malcolm X.
Malcolm Little.
Very briefly. And so he, of course, went by many different names in his life that reflected kind of his personal journey. And at the time of his death, he was known as Alhaji Malik al-Shaba. Any of those names would have counted as correct. And there's a picture of what he would have looked like at the time he was living around Stanton. All right, so thank you again for that. And of course, next week we have our congressman coming, and so we'll have to come up with some national questions for that time. All right, any health and welfare updates? Everybody doing well? Excellent, okay. And I know we do have some guests to be welcomed today. So if you are here with your guests, please stand up and let's recognize you. And I know of one. All right, welcome again. This is Robert Stitt. He is from ABC Warehouse and also a prospective member. Any other guests today? Yes. Reg, would you like to introduce your guest? Okay. Or Sharon, would you like to introduce yourself? Glad to have you, Karen. Thank you. All right, and then I think have and Rob will introduce our other guest in just a moment. Before we get to that, though, the all-important 50-50 raffle. Pull out those tickets.
Do I have any nominees, self-nominees for honest people?
A dinner. Oh, Connie Peters, you're about to retire. Come on.
Great, Rob.
Oh, gee. Yay. How can this be? I'm asking rhetorically.
I guess.
We do make it.
What do I do?
Ready? No, I'm ready.
Pick it up.
I predict the first winner. It's Lynn. It's Lynn. Show.
Yeah, but we didn't pull it.
Well, she bought a ticket. Lynn. You. Well, at least you had the best go down a couple of weeks ago. What is the first number for third place?
For third place here, we have ticket number 714311. 714311.
They sold it?
Ellen Brothers.
All right. Yeah, go ahead. Next one.
Okay, for second prize, 714285.
I'll be back to the table in a moment. And now, 4 gallons of gasoline in first place.
Okay, first place is 714277. Oh.
Thank you.
All right, and without any further ado, that table's got to figure out the one that's the real hot. Now, you're welcome, Rob Wilson, to introduce our guest speaker today.
Back.
Ready? Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. The Rotary Club of Flint continues its annual program on governance, insight to the issues, challenges, and opportunities facing our community from our municipal, county, state, and national elected officials. Today, we focus on the Michigan legislature. Scheduling is always a challenge. We want to give out a special thanks to Representative Cynthia Neely, who expressed her apologies for not being able to join us today. She represents the city of Flint and is available to respond to your current. We are honored to have us today with Sharon Reeves, who's your policy director. So at the end, if any specific questions or follow-up, feel free to touch base. If Sharon wants to stand and wave hi. Joining us today, give us an overview of the Michigan legislature efforts is Senator recently elected, let me correct that, Senator John Cherry. Next week, Congressman Dan Kildee will be joining us. And the week after that, we'll close up with Ellen Ellenberg, who's chairperson of the Genesee County Board of Commissioners. As we've shared, governance is about learning from the past, addressing the present, and preparing for the future. It's the differences between words, intents, outcomes. In some ways, the four-way test may be an excellent foundation to the spirit of governance. Today, we're honored to hear from newly elected first term Senator John Cherry, representing the 27th district, which includes the city of Flint in the western part of the county. And also joining us is Kiana Towns Williams. Kiana, want to stand? She's Senator Cherry's district director. I suggested to both of them that they had plenty of business. Just a couple of highlights about Senator Cherry. Yes, the name is familiar. Cherry, the name is familiar to Genesee County. Are they related to each other? Yes. Is there another John Cherry? Yes. However, today we're focusing on this John Cherry. He's got a bachelor's degree in natural resources and environment, a master's degree in public policy from that outstanding, well-known institution of University of Michigan. Go Blue.
Yeah. Go white.
All right, okay. He lives in Flint, his wife, Teresa, his daughter, Diana, and new infant son, Benjamin, I understand. So how old is he now?
6 months.
6 months. Okay. He's a former state representative serving 2 terms representing portions of Flint. He was the vice chair for the Flint Charter Revision Commission, the first new charter in 40 years. And Jim, where are you? And special thanks to Jim Richardson, our fellow Rotarian, who was an integral part of that process. Over the years, he's been inspired by his friends and family who instilled the importance of public service. So I think in a lot of ways, as we take a look at a number of his efforts, I discovered he was the grandson of UAW retirees and generations of outdoors people, right? Who enjoy the outdoors. He has strong values regarding conserving our environment, ensuring that Michigan preserves its wilderness while supporting job growth and smart urban development. As noted on his office webpage, and I quote, Senator Cherry is fighting to lower costs for working families, protect our water, and strengthen our infrastructure. So my fellow Rotarians, please join me in a warm Rotarian welcome for Senator John Cherry.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you for having me here today. I appreciate the welcome and introduction. It was last week I was in Saginaw and was with the new speaker and sharing a stage with our new majority leader in the Senate, the Lieutenant Governor, and we are in this session in a world of firsts. We have our, although he was elected previously, our first African-American Lieutenant Governor. We have our first African-American Speaker of the House. And we have our first woman majority leader of the Michigan Senate. And I was also with Senator Sarah Anthony, who's the first African-American chair of our Appropriations Committee. And we were going through and introducing people, and they said, and we also have John Cherry, he's a good guy. I had, when I stood up and spoke, I said, well, there is one first. I'm the first Senator Cherry to be able to wield a gavel in the majority. speaking of which, to talk about, what's happening in Lansing, what's going on in the state government. As you're probably aware, was really a historic election in Michigan in November. For the first time in 40 years, Democrats have taken the majority of both houses of the chambers. Last time that we controlled the Michigan Senate was 1983. And despite my hairline, you will be maybe surprised to learn that I was not born at that time. I just have a poor hair gene. So it's the first time in my lifetime, and as I was speaking with the Lieutenant Governor earlier today, we were at an event together. It's the first time in his lifetime as well that Michigan has had a Democratic Senate. We started our session the second Wednesday, it's just traditionally done the second Wednesday of January. And what is typically occurs is the majority party in either house will introduce a initial set of bills that are kind of a statement of priorities, things that we said we were going to get done, that we're going to get done here in a session. This year, there were 6 bills. They were identical, introduced in either house of the legislature that were introduced by Democrats. And I thought that explaining those to you might give you a good idea of what some of the, we're gonna do a lot more than 6 bills, but what some of the priorities of the Democratic majority are. The first 2 bills were a repeal of the retirement tax, a expansion of what we call the working families tax credit, or also known as the earned income tax credit, a repeal of the 1931 law, an expansion of the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act to include people, or to include sexual orientation and gender identity, a repeal of the so-called right to work law, and then a reinstatement of the prevailing wage law. Those were the 6 bills introduced. And it kind of tells you what you should expect to see maybe in the first part of the session here. And the first item of business that we undertook as a legislature when this generational change occurred in November, pretty much, usually there's a relatively active lame duck. We did almost nothing in lame duck. Lame duck is between the election and when new people take office. The speaker and majority leader were very unhappy with the results of the election and decided they don't want to do anything. So we had to do what we call book closing supplemental to make sure that all the books balanced for the previous fiscal year. And there were a few other investments made, some on blight. So the land base didn't be getting $2.5 million in opportunity to get more to help do the demolition program that I know now clerk, but former Commissioner Clemens was very instrumental in getting going in his time in the county board. And there were a few other pieces, water affordability dollars for folks who are having trouble paying their water bill. But we got that done. It was signed into law on January 31st. It is the first time since the 1940s that a bill has been signed into law in January of incoming legislature. Yesterday, the House voted on the final bills as they're structured that will expand the earned income tax credit, the working families tax credit, and repeal the retirement tax. We're expecting to vote on those on Tuesday in the Senate. And I expect the other items, the Elliott-Larsen expansion came out of committee on Thursday. I expect we'll start taking that up on Tuesday as well. So we're really getting to work on starting to get some of those done. There's a lot of bills that are getting introduced. There's a lot of other things that have built up over 40 years that I see we're going to be acting on. Some of you who know me know I've been very active on trying to reform and strengthen the consumer protections for mobile home residents. That hasn't really happened in 30 years. There's been a lot of instances of issues in Genesee County, in my district, in the House, and now in the Senate, where folks are getting taken advantage of. And so I'm hoping to get that going. But we have some work to actually implement some of the recommendations that came out of the Flint water crisis, which, for whatever reason, we had folks who were pushing very hard in the legislature to get that done, but the majority was resistant to actually do most of it. I'm hopeful we'll be able to get those across the finish line pretty quick here in the new session as well. Also this week, the governor gave her executive recommended budget. So I have a state budget that runs from October 1st through September 30th, and usually in February is when the whole process of creating that budget begins. Well, on the executive side, it begins sooner than that. But that's February is when a proposed budget is given to the legislature. And we will be working through that over the spring. The goal is to get a final budget by the end of June. But a lot of that work happens in the first 3-4 months of the year. This year, I'm back serving on the Appropriations Committee and chairing a few of the subcommittees there. And so I'm going to be very active in that. And the governor's recommended budget, their budgets are, particularly state budgets, are huge documents. So I haven't read like all 270 pages of it. But a couple of the highlights, that I would point out, really, it is the number one thing that I take away from that budget is the governor wants to make very significant major investments in education in the state of Michigan. At top of that list is expanding pre-K to all children. That's, as it is, our budget lays out, it's a 4-year plan to get there, but major steps this year on achieving that. Significant advancements in per pupil funding allowance to local school districts, in addition to trying to give extra dollars for at-risk students, kids who are special education students, because it takes more to educate a student who is from comes from an at-risk background. Because I look at myself, my daughter, I came from a very supportive environment, and I've been reading to my daughter since she came home from the hospital, and she's doing very well. And not all kids have that same environment that gets them ready for school. So if we can invest in that early childhood education, that really pays dividends later, not only later in life, but just later in your school career. So I really look at a lot of the investments that are being offered in the governor's budget as investments on education. And I think that's great, because I think it's fundamental to the cornerstone of our success as a state. But we'll be diving into that as we go along through the budget process. And with that, I guess I'll take some questions. Do I call it?
The governor said she wants to give each of us $180. How do you respond to a critic who says, given the size of the surplus, perhaps the figure should be higher?
So the proposal that was made by the governor, that is included in the bill that got passed by the House yesterday. I've heard critics on both sides. It should be more. I don't think it should be anything, because I want you to put that money in the roads. What I'll say is that package as a whole, when you look at it, so it has an earned income tax credit, which is the folks who receive that, you are lower income or low middle income, and you have to be working. The pension tax is folks who retired, and the $180 inflation payments are everybody together. What I think that package does as a whole is it delivers extra targeted relief to those who need it the most, while giving everybody a little bit of relief altogether. So most of the folks who need more through the entire package are going to be getting more relief than just the $180.
About the, really you talked about total inspection.
Sure.
Can you give us some detail about that?
Okay, yeah. I'm sorry, because sometimes, I talk and realize that the issues that I'm thinking about all the time, other people don't hear what I'm thinking. So situation that's really occurred, it's really occurred in all places all across the country, is if you own a manufactured home, you own it in a manufactured home community, you own your house, you purchased that house for tens of thousands, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000, but you don't own the land that it sits on. Okay, so you can, while we call them mobile homes, they're not mobile in the sense that the name implies. If it's been there any length of time, moving it could compromise its structural integrity. And if you can move it, it could cost you, $10,000, $20,000 to do so. So in that situation, if you don't have proper consumer protections, regulatory oversight in place, it's really a situation that is ripe for exploitation. So you've had instances in some states, starting to in Michigan, where you'll have a private equity firm that purchases a manufactured housing community, people who own the homes and are renting the lot, and then they start jacking up the lot rent. When I say jacking up the lot rent, and here in Genesee County, we've had people who've had it increased double or triple. Okay, so it gets to the point where you can't afford it. You get evicted from that house that you own, and then there's what they call an abandoned title process. Well, you've been evicted, you haven't been able to sell it. That mobile home is abandoned. You can go and get that, or that manufactured community owner can go and get the title to that house transferred to them. Now, I didn't say pay for it. I said transfer it to them, right? So one, there's a lot of aspects to the legislation. I've been working with, it was a bipartisan package previously, and there's lots of aspects to it. One piece of that is some requirements in the abandoned title process for compensation to the person who holds title to that home. But it sounds like you're probably hearing me talk about this, and you're like, that can't actually really be true. Like, you can be evicted from your home and it can be taken from you and you're out of luck. It is. So part of that bill dealt with requiring compensation to somebody who loses title to their home, fair market value compensation, amongst other things. There's a lot of other pieces too, but that's kind of a little background on some of the situation that exists in mobile home communities right now in the United States.
My question has to do with opioid-related deaths. So just some statistics. In Michigan, we've had more people die in the past year from opioid-related deaths, overdoses, than in car crashes. I mean, I know that there's about 1.4 billion that's become available from the settlement with pharmaceutical companies. I think the first 80 million is now becoming available to spend in Michigan. And I also saw a news article that in the MTA station downtown, there is now a vending machine to dispense Narcan. It's an Narcan that's running. If you're witnessing somebody having an overdose, you get this and save their life literally in 4 seconds. I mean, that's what we refer to as harm reduction. I know it's a little bit controversial. They also have test strips in that machine to test to make sure that what you're taking is only what you think you're taking and not contaminated with something, which is what leads to these deaths. But I guess my question is, what is the climate in our state capital of our harm reduction and overall spending on using these resources to reduce the number of deaths? Is that much of a conversation
that you're hearing people out? So I will say, I think the conversation is shifting right now. So we were under a political environment for the past 4 years that is different than where we are today. And there's been lots of conversations about, and the term that's used is behavioral health, right? And a lot of understanding that there's connections between behavioral health and physical health. And then there's been a lot of fighting about how you actually make sure that those two pieces are working together. But I will say the thing that I'm hearing more today than I did 6 months ago is the term social determinants of health, which I think is, what we understand is health outcomes are highly correlated with poverty, right? And amongst other things. And I would say, opioid abuse has that same correlation. And understanding that those correlations exist and that if we want to improve people's health, mental or physical, an addiction is a health issue, right? That we need to address those social determinants of health. And, I know that the conversations about how we address social determinants of health are starting to happen between the new chair of DHHS budget and DHHS, Department of Health and Human Services, our health agency in the state of Michigan. The behavioral health issues are being approached from a different place than they were 6 months ago, I believe.
Now, what kind of support is there from municipalities? Sharing. Also, support for expanding voting access, the early voting. All of that.
Yeah, great question. So the governor's executive recommended budget asked for a 10% increase in revenue sharing. The challenge that I think some communities in Genesee County face, both, it's not just the city of Flint, is not just a revenue sharing challenge. We've started to address some of it in the last budget. We have what we term legacy costs, which is, pension liability that wasn't funded, and that because we need to actually get it to be funded, is taking up a significant slice of a municipality's revenue. And we also have OPEB costs, other post-employment benefits, typically health insurance for municipal retirees, that has been underfunded and that's not just a city of Flint issue. I mean, the county hasn't funded its OPEB as well. In the last year, we put $850 million to try to bring every municipality in the state up to 60% funded on their pension liability. Those payments are supposed to go out this spring, but there've been the past year has not had the best market returns, so we might need to do a little bit more to top off to get people there. We got to look at that. But the other piece we need to start addressing is that unfunded OPEB, which is statewide like $12 billion unfunded OPEB for local municipalities. And we'll see when the dollars go out and we get the data from locals, what our unfunded pension liability is statewide, but it's probably going to be a good $6 to $8 billion as well. So there's the revenue sharing piece, but there's also the piece that we need to address, which is helping municipalities deal with the unfunded liabilities that exist from people who've already retired. And when you talk about impact, for example, the city of Flint, and I was just looking at these numbers this week, we'll see what it ends up getting to after the payment on the $850 million. But over 50% of the city's revenue was going for those two unfunded liabilities, over 50%. That's not sustainable for any community. And so that's something that I talked to our appropriations chair. I said, I want to try to address the OPEB issue. If we get everybody 60%, that's going to be a great stride. Let's try and see what we can do to address the OPEB issue for local units of government as well.
What about transparency? I'm a member of a school board. We're accountable for transparency. But when you guys get at your level, you're not. Why is it?
So, great question, and I have good news. In November, the people of Michigan voted on a constitutional amendment that included requirements for financial transparency on the part of our executive officers and the legislature. And what that law says is by the end of this year, we kind of put requirements on what it needed to look like. But by the end of this year, we need to pass a law that sets up that system and have it go into effect by, I think it's April 1st of 2014. So Michigan has traditionally ranked very low on that. Every year every session I've been in when I was in the House, we passed out financial disclosure laws and they died in the Senate. Well, now the Constitution says we got to get it done. And in that constitutional amendment includes the ability for the citizens of Michigan to sue if the legislature doesn't create the law. So I expect we'll be changing and improving our transparency within the next year. Yep.
Senator, we were talking at the table, and one of the folks said that they have an adult child moving back to Michigan from the East Coast, and we need more of that, right, in our state. And once again, we lost another congressional seat for, I don't know, the fourth or fifth time around, as we continue to not shrink, but we're not growing as fast as those other states. What are some thoughts you have about attracting and retaining folks, frankly, our generation, who may have left Michigan, to get them to come back to public state, which has impacts schools and the economy? Some thoughts on the growing issue.
Yeah, we actually had a nice presentation from the state economists on population, really it's economic outlook. When you talk about economic outlook of the state, a huge portion of that is driven by the population. If you're growing, your economic output improves. If you're shrinking, it often leads to your economy shrinking. And so a huge piece of that being, a huge piece of our economic outlook being driven by population growth or the rate of population growth, because we had a bad decade from 2000 to 2010 where we didn't grow, but we've been moving in a better direction, but growing at a slower rate than other states. So when in that presentation, a couple of the pieces that were discussed as that drive population growth is, what makes people move. Oftentimes it is employment. Oftentimes it's family. There's other reasons that people move, better house, different things like that, but those aren't necessarily cross-border moves, right? So that's part of the reason I think the education investment that we're talking about is so important, because education is such a driver for where I want to live, right? I want to make sure that my kids are going to be able to receive a good education and economic opportunity. And I know their economic opportunity is tied to their ability to get a good education. So I think really that's very important in helping to address those population trends. And making sure we have a highly qualified workforce also helps ensure that we have a good job market. So we're doing stuff at the state level right now to make sure that we don't lose the auto industry to Tennessee and Kentucky and what have you. And that's key to make sure we retain those jobs, but that's not enough as a state to drive our economy. We also need to be building quality of life and making sure the state is a place where you can and want to raise a family. And I'm pleased to see the direction we're going in doing so.
comment first and then kind of two-parter. I had an opportunity at an event a couple weeks back to talk to Rick Pluto, who's an NPR politics, state politics reporter, and we were talking about it. And a few minutes later, I realized I was talking about John Sherry, and he kept saying John Sherry wasn't. We realized in about 5 minutes we were talking about somebody totally different. So
At least one of you wasn't talking about a hockey guy, right?
so, the hockey night candidate.
Yeah.
He's a good half time.
Yeah.
Two-part question here. Kind of go back, keep talking a little bit about education stuff and money for the schools. One of the major issues in our city that we consistently see get worse, we saw a little bit of improvement this weekend, was on a voting level, is blight, not just housing blight, but specifically the school buildings that are now blighted. Now Flint Central is the most in your face, horrible eyesore that shouldn't be. And so my first part of my question is there anything at your office does or at your level that helps out with that? Because from us as everyday people, I think that's what's smarter than me. For me, I see this as the school board is fight over and nothing can happen. It's getting worse. They don't have the resources for it also. So you guys have resources to help them out with that stuff. And is there progress that can happen outside? I know Washington just got voted, but I'm thinking Flint Central's and even not currently. Second part of the question. I-69 sound wall, is there any progress?
Okay, yep, great. So are there things that we can do at our level to help that situation? Yes, there are things we can do to help. We can't fix everything, but there are things we can do to help. We started that last year. The governor's recommended budget includes additional help as well. But we created a school consolidation and infrastructure fund. And we put $400 million in it in the last budget. The dollars there can be used to help consolidate schools and then also to handle infrastructure issues for school districts. Now, before those dollars can go out, there's a statewide school infrastructure study that's occurring. The Flint community schools need to participate in that. I was having a conversation with one of the board members yesterday about this, because that's how you get access to the dollars. So we participate in that study, helps identify what the deficient infrastructure is, what infrastructure investment needs are, and then you can apply to get those dollars. The governor's recommended budget asked for an additional $500 million to go into that fund to help fund those school infrastructure issues. Now, the part we can't help on, we can't make the school board vote to do one thing or another, right? We can make sure dollars are available, but we can't control what individual school districts decide to do. But, well, nobody is yet because it's just getting going. So but I will say, there's, I want to say 5 out of the 7 school board members are new, right? And I think they know that things need to be demoed, and I think that's why you saw the first one, Washington, the RFP go out for that one. I think you will see more in the future. So I think the change that occurred in the school board was good, and I think we're going to start seeing some positive progress there. Now, the other question about the 69 sound wall, we got the money appropriated. I had a conversation with MDOT a couple weeks ago, and they are hiring the firm to do the engineering and what have you on it right now. And I think they said that there should be a public meeting on it in the summer. And the folks who are in with a certain radius of the sound wall itself are going to, at that meeting, going to have to, when they present, this is what we're looking at the sound wall, do you want to do it? And they're going to have to say yes for it to happen. I think they will, because we've heard from the folks who live close to the expressway, they want it. So, but that's kind of the stage of it. It's about to go into the engineering phase.
Well, thank you so much. It always feels like a really special opportunity that we can hear straight from our legislators about what's going on and to be able to ask those direct questions. So thank you so much for your engagement and for your willingness, Senator, for being here today. I also want to send my thanks to Rob Jewell for helping to organize this presentation for today. Reg, for your inspirational message. Lauren, thank you for doing the bulletin notes this week. Carrie, always for your setup and takedown. And Fred, for your help with the raffle. Please do come back next week. Friday, we will be joined by U.S. Representative Dan Kilby, that he will be continuing our governance program for the month of February. So with that, hope you go forth, have a terrific weekend, whether you're celebrating with football or doing something entirely different, whatever floats your boat with that. But hope it's a safe and wonderful weekend for you. And we are adjourned.